Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sit Down in Lockdown. Look who I have with me. It's the wonderful Mr. Nik Rabinowitz. Whoop whoop, right? For those of you that tuned in, feel free to ask us any questions at any time. We will try and get to them as quickly as possible, or if we can. As you can see, the lovely Nik Rabinowitz is looking rugged. You're looking rugged, sir. How are you?
Rug- Rugged.
So, what does your hat say? Not your mom.
This is not your mum. Is it coming to you backwards?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But I can just make it out. All right, cool. So, right off the bat, Nick, I'm going to ask you, how are you doing, and is there anything that you're missing during this lockdown besides stage time?
I'm missing just leaving the house and not coming back.
And not coming back.
Just not coming back.
did you do that
To
often in
do
the
that?
past? It's like just
Yeah, I
leave.
did. Just, I'd just be like, hey, babe, I'm just going out for some smokes. You know those dads who do that and then they never come back. But you would know something's up because I don't smoke.
But you pick it up just so you can just so you can go. That's funny, man. Cool, man. So let's talk a bit about your.
I'm, I'm missing going, I don't know, man, going up the mountain, going. Now I was doing a lot of swimming in the ocean and surfing and those things. And just with three kids in my house, oftentimes I'm finding the homeschooling just challenging, and I
Mhm.
just want to get the fuck out. Sometimes I just want to go and think in a quiet place, and there's nowhere you can go but in. Nowhere out but in.
Where are you now? Are you in like an office of some kind, or because I see this
Self
book?
self isolating in my office.
Okay.
This is not a background. We're on Skype.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That at least you have an office that you can kind of quietly go to and maybe get some.
I've actually some inspiration. I've actually done all of my online things from this very place.
Yeah.
And it actually doubles up. I share it with my wife. So in the mornings, this is where she talks to patients from
Hmm.
on through the computer.
Hmm.
So there's essential services that happen. Yeah, I don't know if we can argue that comedy is an essential service. We probably could.
I think it is. I mean, people need to laugh. People need to somewhat forget or get like an escape, if you will, from what's happening now. Just a bit of comic relief, so to speak. I think it is. So we've got some people tuned in. Storm Legacy says hi, Joe and Nick. So there's a Oba King Moreau. Sorry, it says good evening, gentlemen.
Oba, Obi
Oba.
the villains in the house.
So Nick, tell us, how long have you been doing comedy?
19 years. Started
19.
in 2001, October 2001,
Do
just
you
after the planes into the Twin Towers.
do you remember the first time ever being on stage?
Yes, I remember it. I don't quite remember the actual performance, but I remember the Obs Cafe. I mean, not the Obs Cafe, the armchair theatre being backstage. I was wearing a red sort of Coca-Cola, round Coca-Cola hat and washing up gloves. And I did I did my 5 minutes in character as a Zimbabwean donkey wrestler called Jabulani Ndlovu, which would be super unwoke to do in 2020. But it was 2000
Do you remember like a little bit of it?
gags. Yeah, he had a gag about because it was based on a guy. So the year before, I worked with a traveling theatre company touring Southern Africa, with guys from all 7 countries in Southern Africa, and one of them was called Mandla Moyo. And Mandla Moyo was this incredible character. He was a brilliant performer, but also a black belt in something or other, and he had these hunting dogs, and he used to tell stories. I think the stories were all grossly exaggerated, but I based this character on him. and I think he used to blow dagga up the nostril of his. I think it was his donkey. Yes, his donkey. He had donkeys. Because in Botswana, where there were like donkeys everywhere, so donkeys on my brain for months. And I just get this idea, you smoke up the nostril of the donkey, then it would like basically fly. It would be like donkey.com. And he was like, a whole thing about donkey.com. And he was, I remember I had a bit about his wife, and they had their marriage vows were something like, whether the weather be cold or whether the weather be hot, we'll be together, whatever the weather, whether you like it or not. The Zimbabwean accent, which I'm not going to do. It was a Shona accent. It was very specific.
Okay. Well, you're actually very good with accents. I've seen you perform many times, and you can just seem to very easily like go into different characters and pull on some of your accent. What is your favorite accent to perform or to do?
Right now, I've been reading Harry Potter for the last 50 to my kids, and my favorite character is Hagrid. I haven't really mastered Hagrid's voice, mainly because I've never watched a Harry Potter movie, but I think it's kind of a northern accent. But ooh, Harry! Doing it, but I don't know how to do it properly. But one of the fun things I did a few years ago was during the World Cup. We did a compilation of soccer commentary for various, I don't know how many countries, and I had to do this bit of commentary in all these languages. So we did like, I can still. You want me to see if I can remember a few?
Sure. Yeah.
We had like Argentina. It started with Argentina. Mascherano pasa la pelota. Higuaín, pipita para Messi. Messi tira. Messi gol. Argentina. And there was like, I don't know, there were like a whole bunch. The German one was Klaus Hardenballen, schöner Pass, Balakistan weiter in der Ball zu Schweinsteiger schießt Tor! And they all ended with La Duma because the song was called La Duma. Cruzamento perfeito, Kaká no outro canto, Kaká para Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, Elu chuta, golo! We even had like Slovenia was Koren Brijogi, Lepo Bodaya Dedic para Novakovic still in Shadetek! There was France, Ribéry avec le ballon, bon crossé, Anelka, place au fond, Anelka, Benzema avec le tir! But my favorite was Japan. Onoga, Goru Motomas, Nakamura, in the Moto Shuto, Goru, Raduma.
What about Scottish?
For some reason, we didn't have the Scottish in there. We had Ireland, wheeling with the ball, a fantabulous cross. Adam Winky at the far post. Sorry, that's Nigerian mixed with Irish.
Oh man, that's brilliant.
Let's go!
All right. Wow, that is fantastic, man. That is really, really awesome. So tell us a bit more about your comedy career. So you started in Armchair, and you obviously continued through there. Any favorite gigs that you've done, like the one that really stands out, and why?
Sure. You know what? I think that I think we overestimate what a big part venues play. There's an expression, I think, by Brian Eno, who said the room creates the music. Might have even been a book, I can't remember. So I think some of my best gigs have been like almost shaped by the room. And those early days at the Armchair were just they were memorable and amazing because that room was just great for stand up. I mean, there's obviously like you do big shows that you remember, like doing the Royal Albert Hall in London with Bafani.
Nice.
I mean, I also remember some of the really awful ones, which I suppose we'll talk about later. But I mean, most recently I did this gig, and I can't even remember. I've done a lot of shows at like Cafe Rue, places, the room in Noord called Cafe Rue, which also it kind of has that low ceiling and intimate vibe. And some nights, you know, will be better than others. But I suppose it's when you're in the zone and kind of everything clicks and your crowd work is on fire and you're just super connected and present and not in your head about what you're doing. Yeah. And those are the ones that stick, don't they?
Yeah, no, absolutely. How was your gig at Viper Lounge?
Oh, the Viper Lounge. Geez, that was interesting. That's a biker bar
Yeah.
up in Bloberg or somewhere around there. And I was pretty nervous because I just pictured all these Hells Angels and like like racists and whatever. So I was kind of anxious about it. And then it turns out there's only like 12 Hells Angels in the whole country. Like we think that there's hundreds of them out there, but it's actually super hard to qualify. And there were only like, there were two there. I mean, they were quite intense guys, but you feel very safe, don't you? I don't know if have you been there?
No,
You
I
feel like,
haven't.
I'll tell you, yeah, that place next door was robbed 5 times, and that place is like robbed 10 times, and that was just in one day. And yeah, we've never been robbed. No, yeah.
That's
I had a
awesome.
who somehow sneaked into the audience at the Viper Lounge. That was weird as well. I
Really?
remember that.
Was there someone that was opening up for you?
No, I opened for myself.
Oh,
I
okay.
opened up for myself. I opened up to the audience. I shared. I was vulnerable.
All right. All right. So, what made you start comedy? Like, were you into theater before you started? Were you what made you decide this is what I want to do moving forward?
So as I mentioned, I worked for this theatre company in the year 2000. So I'd finished varsity. I had a business organizational psychology degree that I had no idea what to do with. And a friend's dad, actually he was a friend as well, was a theatre director, playwright. And he said, well, he was always doing these crazy adventures to places in Africa to make theatre. And he said, well, we're looking for somebody to kind of be a production manager, so to speak. And so I worked for him for like a year, and I just did everything. I drove trucks, and I set up tents, and I dug him a long drop on one occasion, and I typed out scripts, and I did the lighting in these. We were like in the bush, middle of like South Luangwa National Park, with frogs and hippos in the background. It was quite amazing.
Yeah.
And I kind of got the theatre bug at the time. I thought I'd like to be an actor, and so that job came to an end. And then a friend of mine said, "Well, actually, she sent me to do this kind of a transformational personal development program because I was shy, couldn't talk in public, and I had that breakthrough. And then immediately afterwards, I got a job acting in a play in Joburg. They auditioned me over the phone. In fact, I don't think they even auditioned me. I think they were just desperate for one more actor. So I went to Joburg, and that was the beginning of my acting career. My mom actually came up to Joburg. I remember this very clearly. Came up to Joburg to see the play, and afterwards said, "We're very concerned about you. I mean, I don't know. It was Anyway, I stayed there. I lived with my friend's parents, and her stepdad was called Roy, and he'd like fought in the Rhodesian War. He was like a Selous scout, and he'd come home. I had this big afro at the time, and he dog shit on my lawn, and just a very weird time of my life. And then I came back, and somehow got into corporate theatre when people used to make little theatre plays about various things and perform for corporates and tour these things. And I did that for, I don't know, 5 years or something. But in that time, about 6 months later, I overheard someone talk about stand-up comedy. And I'd never been to stand-up comedy. I think I'd been to one show in like 95 or something at the Grahamstown Theatre Festival. And they said, no, there's this workshop that you can go to run by this guy called Mark Sampson. And I went to the workshop, and I was like, what am I going to do? And I did Jabulani and Ndlovu, the Zimbabwean donkey wrestler. And then he was like, "That's great. Why don't you come and do 5 minutes?" And then and I did 5 minutes that Sunday, and that was that.
Wow. Sure. That is very interesting. So did you start with or like when you had entered the game and you were starting to do the armchair and stuff, who else was with you that was there? Like was it Kurt Skunrad, was anyone Riyad Musa, all
Yeah,
those guys?
yeah. Well, the headline acts at that time were and hosting were Kurt, Stewart, Riyadh was definitely headlining at that time. Conrad had been around for a bit. Loyiso Gola had just started, I think, the same year, maybe. Mark Lottering had been around for a little bit, but he was already sort of doing one-man stuff. Dave Levinson, yeah, those kind of guys. There's a lot of guys that were there that kind of aren't on the scene anymore. Well, I guess none of us are on the scene anymore.
True, but like okay, so those guys started like at the same time. How was it back then? Was it? Do you think it's the same like camaraderie that there is now? Like a lot of the comics that enter the scene were very nice to each other. We try and help each other out. Was it the same there? Or were you guys a bit more competitive back then?
Yeah, mate, I feel like I'm old. I feel like an old guy talking about reminiscing of the past. That's John back in those days. Um, no, it was so fresh. It was this kind of new thing, and there was just such a sort of spark of electricity around it.
Nice.
It felt really exciting. Audiences were excited. There wasn't much of it around. There was only, I don't know, 50 working comics in the country or something. And so you felt like you were at the leading edge of something, even though, I mean, I was doing open mic. I didn't really know what I was doing. But people were on the whole very supportive. I think, it was called the Cape Comedy Collective. And there was a sort of, I think it's eventually sort of coming apart at the seams because I don't know. It may be for whatever reason, but there was definitely a sort of collaborative feel about it, and people were supportive. Well, I felt supported by lots of people, and then there's always people you go, well, so. People say that about that. This guy is weird. He just comes to the gig and he does the thing and leaves. Like, who is he? It's like hugging smoke. What is he all about? Where's he going? Why is he not staying for? Because he's got 3 fucking kids. All right.
How old are your kids? Like, what's their age?
Uh, my kids are 10, 8, and 3, nearly 4.
Okay.
3. Yeah.
All what? Boy, girl.
Oldest the boys, and then Sophie's the youngest.
Okay, cool. Well, congratulations
I
on
say
that.
Sophie's the girl because we're waiting until she's 4 so she can choose the gender herself.
Okay, that's very cool of you.
I mean, they.
Yeah. um, cool. So, what does your wife do again?
My wife is a doctor.
A doctor. Okay, awesome. So you're a sorry, she's a doctor. You're a comedian. How does that work? Is she constantly like analyzing you or anything like that?
No, I mean, listen, with these online shows, it's kind of I decided to put her in the room, like actually have someone in the room when I perform. So I did it twice, but then I forgot that actually, anyone who's been with somebody for more than 6 months, any comedian who's been with a partner for more than 6 months will know they stop laughing at your jokes.
Yes.
They've heard they know your thing. So don't expect them to. That's the thing, because expectations will lead to upset.
Yes. Yeah, that's very true. My wife is also
Uh,
quite tired of my jokes.
I think it's a good combination. I think you'll find a lot of comedians are with people who are not comedians, because we need grounding, Joe.
Yes.
We need people to ground us.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah, that's very true. So tell us about your most embarrassing gig you've ever done.
Oh, there are many. There are many. I'll start with just a few weeks ago. One of my first things online for a corporate, and I pre-recorded all of the stand-up, and then I recorded the links, and then we finished editing all of it, and the client said, "But it's not funny." And no, we're cancelling the whole thing. That was embarrassing, but it's weird because it's not live, and so you don't really have the experience of dying, but you kind of do.
Yeah.
But embarrassing gigs. I was reminded of one of my first gigs when I stopped doing characters. So it was probably 2002, and I decided to just be Nik. And it was very confronting. And I went on at this place in Rondebosch called at the Keg in Rondebosch, and somebody heckled me after about 2 minutes, and it was something like, "You're not funny, get off, get off."
Yo.
And I was like, okay, and I just got on the thing, and I just left, and I walked, and luckily the door was that way as well, so I just walked straight out the door onto the main road, and then just kept walking in actually what turned out the opposite direction to my car. But I hosted, like, one of the first things I hosted the Luries in, I don't know, 2004 or something, and I wasn't ready for 3,500 coked up ad advertising people, and I died a horrible death. I remember I had this inner ear with the director, and I was doing jokes, and I thought it was going well, and then I just heard in my ear, "Can you just stop? Just don't do any more jokes. Just run through the program." It was a horrible feeling. But one of the gigs I remembered, I was talking to Skulk and Rob about this the other night. I was asked to host this corporate it was Fruit and Veg City before it became Food Lovers Market. It was Fruit and Veg City, and they had their Christmas party at an Australian bar at Century City called Sheila's Outback Bar, and they said, "We'd like you to be an Australian. Can you wear the hat and everything and just talk in an Australian accent for the whole gig, for the whole show? And what you're going to do is you're going to commentate. We're going to have some rat races where we have actual rats. They have these pipes with rat racing in them. And then after that, we'll bring out the strippers and we'll auction them. You will auction off the strippers, and whoever is the highest bidder will mud wrestle the strippers in the mud wrestling thing." Now these were just like head office. I'm not making this up. There were 60 people from head office, and they were sort of standing outside. They'd erected a makeshift mud wrestling stage, and these two, like, I saw them backstage before the show go, "Fuck with them, is this gig going on?" And then they sort of were in like G-strings, and then they got into the mud pit, and then the CEO had too much to drink, so he was enthusiastically bidding. He was basically the only person bidding. And then I was like, "Well, yeah, mate, you get in with the mud wrestlers." And then he got in, and I'll never forget this. He was wearing these red Y-fronts, these red undies. Not be unseen. He got in the thing with them, and then they were like flapping around in the mud, slipping around in the mud. And then someone one of the girls grabbed his red undies and sort of like pulled it. And his like testicle just went, "How's it?" And then, I'll never forget that. Fast forward to 2018, so probably 15 years later, I was asked to MC their Food Lovers Market end of year conference.
Oh boy!
Now head office is 600 people. There were like 1,200 people in the room, and their guest of honor was Marcus Jooste. Before what was that whole Steinhoff gate? They'd flown Marcus Jooste in his jet from somewhere. And I was like, "Hey, Brian," to the CEO, he's still the CEO. I was like, "Do you remember the gig I did for you guys at Century City with the Mavericks strippers?" "No, from Teasers. They were from Teasers, weren't they? And you got in the ring with and you still got the red hat." Are you wearing the red undies now? Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Food Lovers Conference Market Conference thingy.
Dude, that story sounds so outrageous. Like, it sounds like something you would write for a movie just so it would be funny. Like, it's. Oh my word. Jeez. I guess that's like the weirdest gig you've ever done, probably, right? Like,
No, I've done weirder. I mean, I've done weirder. I swear.
I can't imagine anything that would top that. I really can't. I mean, even we have a comment here like that someone's saying, Chico, hey, Chico, thank you for tuning in, buddy. Where are these bizarre gigs happening? Nick, what did you get
Dude.
yourself into? Wow.
Oh, man. I've seen a few things.
You have this distant look in your eye. It's like, I've seen some shit.
You know what I was remembering? I was remembering being flown to Nigeria to do a corporate for CocaCola.
Nice.
And it was corporate theater. I don't know if I was doing stand-up. Yeah, I must have been a stand-up by then. But they said, no, we want you to come and do a play. And somehow I got asked to write the play. And I wrote a play about the history of Coke and the founders. And me and this other guy said, we'll do a two-hander. And we get flown to Nigeria. Then we get on another plane and flown to some weird part of Nigeria where people drove on the wrong side of the road intentionally. I mean, not like our wrong side of the road. Like they would just drive on the other side. At night, you'd see cars. Anyway, we nearly died a few times and then finally did but it was across the swimming pool from the audience who were eating dinner. On the other side of the swimming pool, we were on a little stage. And they came to us 10 minutes into our set and said, could you please stop? We're eating. And that was the whole trip to Nigeria.
The whole trip. Have you ever been to the States and performed there?
I have, yeah.
And how was that?
It was cool. I've been a couple of times. They were quite different experiences, but they were pretty cool. I did a couple of like synagogues. I did one in where was that? LA? Yeah, it was in LA, and then Orange County, and I did this gig at Gotham Comedy Club.
Yes.
I did some weird comedy competition, and then I went and performed there.
How far did you get in the competition?
I came second, but I was beaten by a guy from the Philippines who his supporters performed what's called an SSL, which they basically hacked. They brought down the website. They crashed the website so that he could win. And then he won, but he couldn't do stand-up. So they had to fly me over to do the stand-up.
Oh, wait. Where do you have like the best stories?
I was thinking about this other gig before Trevor Noah. Well, Trevor was actually famous, but he was famous at that point for Strictly Come Dancing. So wherever he went, like people would mob him for being the guy who won Strictly Come Dancing. I think he won. Anyway, we're doing this gig in Durban at the casino. And we get there and there's like 1,200 chairs laid out. There's a long room. It's me, Trevor, Eugene Corza, somebody else. And there were, when I say 18 people, I'm probably being generous. I think there were probably 15 people in the 1,200 seater. And we were like, should we do the show? Okay, yeah, the show must go on. He started performing. I don't know. Eugene goes on. And then as I go on, I see my cousin. I'd invited my cousin out the corner of my eye. I see him arrive with an entourage of like 12 people that had dinner and they were late and they came. So now suddenly we go from like 14 to 24. And I did my set and then they immediately left. Like as Trevor was coming on, they left and 5 other people left. So it went down to like 9 for Trevor.
How did he do? Did he at least do well, or no?
I don't know. I think I left. Well,
That's brilliant. Oh man. Well, Nick, I see that the 30 minutes is already up, and I know that you said you could only be around for 30 minutes. So yeah, look, I would love to have you back for a longer session if possible, or
let's do it.
a longer show, just to get to know you a bit better and continue with the stories. You have amazing stories. So I'm not going to keep you. You obviously have something else going on. So I will thank you once again. Thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing these stories with us. It was great.
Awesome, man.
Cool. Cheers, man. All
Hang
right.
in there.
Cool. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Nik Rabinowitz. Yeah, unfortunately, he couldn't stay too long. He has some other arrangements, but it was nice to chat to him for those short moments and get to know him a little bit better. He's a really nice guy. You can see he's a bit tired from three kids and taking care of the kids and stuff like that, but he's a great person and funny guy, as you guys can see. And hopefully we'll have him back. I would definitely like to have him back, and we'll keep in touch. And by the way, guys, let me know who you want to see on the show as well. I'll try and get in contact with some of the guys and see if we can bring them on the show. Let me know if there's anyone specific. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel. I am interviewing a lot more comedians throughout the lockdown. Tomorrow, actually, is not a comedian on the show. He is a musician, and tomorrow night we will have Mark Hayes on the show. Mark Hayes, someone that I met not too long ago, last year and the year before. We've performed together. Obviously, I don't sing. I was emceeing a gig, and he was performing. But he's a really cool guy. He was on Idols. I can't remember if he won, but we'll be discussing about his career. And I thought it was a nice, different pace to comedians, trying to get some of the musicians on board. And later on in the week, I will have a magician on the show as well. Wednesday, I'm going to be with Werner Weber. We're going to talk a bit about, we're going to have our show Let's Talk, where we're going to talk about current affairs and some other topics that have been brought to us by you, the viewers. And on Friday, it's another roast. So that's going to be very fun and very interesting. Those roasts are always a lot of fun. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, Chico. Thank you, Doc RSA, for tuning in. Oba King, Storm Legacy. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. So yeah, tonight's a short one. But yeah, like I said, hopefully we'll have Nik Rabinowitz back in the future, and I'll be bringing on some other guys. So I will see you here same time tomorrow. If I don't see you before then, stay safe and good night.